So, is this the first time you two have written together?
Yes, this is.
I'd love to hear about that. Sort of first of all, how you came together to this story, and then also what your process was like as a writing team.
Sure. Well, I think that like the idea of writing something together sort of came about organically over the years. We started by acting in a couple projects together, and that was like our toe dip into, do we enjoy being on set together? And, we've talked so much about The Rental already, and that was our first time working together in this capacity with Dave directing and me acting, and that was just such a fulfilling experience for both of us. Even though I was not a writer or producer on The Rental, I really felt like a collaborator with Dave and like a real support system for him there. And I've never felt more comfortable on a set until this movie, I think. Just because I trust Dave so much, and I know, I've been able to watch for so many years the care he puts into everything he makes, and I knew he had such a strong vision for that. And watching him write The Rental with Joe Swanberg is sort of what inspired me to start writing, and I wrote Horse Girl with Jeff Baena and Spin Me Round with Jeff Baena, which we were actually, thank you, we were writing Spin Me Round and this simultaneously during the pandemic. So basically after The Rental, it just sort of felt like a no-brainer to kind of like, oh, we should write the next thing together because we're already right here and it feels so nice.
And we actually had the seed of the idea for this at the end of 2019, and we were like, when are we gonna actually have time to sit down and do this? And then 3 months later, the world ended, and we were like, if you remember at the time, everyone was like, all right, it's gonna be locked down for 2 weeks. And so I was like, all right, we got 2 weeks to write this thing. And so, I was waking us up early, we were writing all day, she was getting a little irritated with me, but we pumped out the first draft in 2 weeks and then had forever to refine it.
And what was the seed idea? Was it of someone going back to their town and...
Yeah. It came about when we were actually walking through my hometown in Northern California, and we were walking from my high school to my mom's house, and I think just being in that setting, these ideas of going home and reconnecting with your roots and kind of confronting who you used to be compared to who you are now and how you feel about all of that, it just kind of made its way into the story.
I think that we sort of started with the genre. We love the romantic comedy space, and we wanted to kind of just try it. And then our way in was through the characters, and I feel like all of the themes in the movie sort of revealed themselves to us even as we were writing it. I think at the beginning of the writing process, we were like, we're gonna just make a classic rom-com. And as we were kind of like just following the character's natural journey, we're like, but it's more gonna be like we're Trojan horsing in like a female empowerment story about like women connecting and figuring out who they are. And really it's like an adult coming of age story. Like by the time we were pitching it, it had kind of morphed into this other thing. But I still think we retained the elements that we wanted to from that, the nostalgia of those rom-coms from the 80s and 90s that we love. And then kind of, I think also because we're such rom-com fans, and I will watch rom-coms over and over and over, they're my comfort movies, the tropes are so familiar. People who love rom-coms know the tropes, and that's actually great, because then when you know the rules, it's easier to break the rules.
That's what I love in this, is it all the tropes are there, but then there are these darker elements that creep in, or, you just consistently make some very, very bad choices, and, it's great to see kind of the stakes escalate in that.
Yeah, I think with both of the movies I directed, like if you look at the synopsis on the page, they might feel familiar, where you might think like, oh, I know where this is going, but then within the execution is where we try to bring something unique. And like she was saying, it's like we use what we know and love about these different genres to almost lead the audience down a certain path and then try to pull the rug out from under them every step of the way and keep you guessing.
I also just feel like there are, even though Dave's the two films he's directed are in vastly different genres, there's a lot of similarities at the core, which is like that Dave is drawn to doing these relationship stories, right? These deep dives into really grounded characters, and then sort of like putting them in, as he said, like kind of familiar situations in the cinema landscape, but being like, but how would you actually react? What would that feel like? Like, let's just make it all complex and messy.
I wanted to, you mentioned the female empowerment story that's smuggled in, and I wanted to ask you about your scenes. Well, the cast is incredible, and Kelsey Clemens is so fantastic, and your scenes with her really provide a cool through line in the story, like outside of the rom-com elements, right?
Totally.
I mean, it's about sort of what you find in each other. Could you talk about working with her and that part of the story?
Definitely. Kirsty is incredible. Well, first of all, that character, I think that was kind of that was like our first big detour when we were laying out the characters and the rom-com tropes and all this stuff. And we were like, okay, so the character of the bride is usually either kind of like bright-eyed and naive, or like a shrew, you gotta hate her, you want the other characters to get together. And we sort of just thought, well, what if she's like cool and great and low-key our favorite character in the movie, and how does that make everyone else react,
That in itself throws a wrench in everything, where her character's coming to break up a wedding, and then all of a sudden she meets the bride and she's like, I like you. This is
Yeah.
making everything so complicated. And when you think about love triangles in a lot of movies, it's usually two people going after one person. And in this one, it goes all directions.
Yeah,
They're
anybody
kind of all
could
going
end up
after
with
each other.
anybody.
Yeah.
But also, there is this thing where my character is really identifying with her character, right? She really represents the person that Allie used to be, the way she used to see herself. And so, over the course of the movie, she finds herself, in her digging that comes from like a sort of sinister, manipulative place, she actually starts to realize all their similarities and want to protect her. When it comes back around to everything that's gone on with Sean, they have to have this big reckoning of all the things that they didn't get closure on from their relationship. And that was us wanting to explore this theme of like the one that got away, and what does that mean when people break up with people and get back together? Why do we have this nostalgia for those people? Are we actually missing like a period of time in our lives and not necessarily that specific person? Like a big part of the plot, right, is Allie kind of, her whole misconception about that first night is like, oh, I only feel this way when I'm with you, not just like, oh, I'm out of touch with a part of myself that could still exist. And to bring it all back around to your actual question, Kirsty, as an actress, is so incredible. She brings a really unexpected energy to the role, and I think to everything she does. We're huge fans of her, and like I think that was part of it, is like her inherent coolness measured against my inherent nerdiness was just right. And truly as an actress, like she's so present, which is also true to the character, and she's always like, I don't know, some people I don't know what I'm trying to say, like it's like I just think she's very surprising in her choices. And that chemistry was so new and perfectly fitting for what these characters are going through, where like she was always kind of unsettling me in a perfect way for those characters versus other people in the film like Danny Pudi, who I feel very comfortable with. And we definitely give it up for Danny. We specifically did that and wrote that role for Danny so that we could lean into that chemistry and history as well.
Yeah. The scene of you and Kirsty sitting on the bed when you're talking to her and she's just taking you in, it looks so great on this big screen. Like she's so still and it's just her eyes as she's taking you in. It's a beautiful moment. I mean, capturing what you were talking about, I think that very different energies from both of you, and just the way she takes you in and everything you say in that moment is really beautiful.
Definitely. She has so much quiet power to the way that she acts, and that's so the character, right, is that she's so confident that she's like, I don't have to compete with this person, I'm just gonna hang out with her. And Kirsty's like that way. There's so much bubbling beneath the surface.
Mm-hmm. Could you also talk about Ellis, who's also fantastic in the film? I mean, just huge talent. And sort of how did you cast him?
Yeah, so I mean, this role, it was really tricky to cast because, all of these characters are flawed, you know. They're making questionable decisions, but at the end of the day, we wanted them all to be redeemable still, because they are good people. They're just going through it. And so with Sean, we needed someone who you just inherently like, and Jay has this quality that you root for him no matter what he's doing. And I think part of it is that he's just so grounded and real and human. And so even though, again, he's doing things that are not the most morally sound things, you can like see where it's coming from, and you can hopefully relate to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was fantastic. Okay, and not to go through every single person in the cast, but Julie
would love
Hagerty.
To. Yeah, the best.
Julie. We did write that role with Julie Hagerty in mind, but with no idea whether we would get her for the role. But you know, it's like when we're writing stuff, we have to picture people.
Sure, but you can imagine her first read, and she's flipping through, and she's like, huh.
I will say, talking to her on set, she said to me, she was like, I found this incredibly refreshing. She was like, you know, at my age, I never get sent material that has a lot of sex scenes in it, and she was really excited. A woman after my own heart.
She was only on set for 3 days, and we all fell in love with her to the point where, like, still text with her constantly. She's like our other mother, truly.
Yeah.
She's amazing. And Haley Joel Osment, too, I thought was... I
mean, we wrote that for him, too.
You did, okay.
Hey, that's another role where... on the page, it's probably like the most comedic role, but we wanted someone who wouldn't like lean too far into the jokes. We wanted someone who was like a good actor who could just kind of inhabit that goofy, you know, whatever. And
you can imagine, like, tonally, the movie is kind of unique in that we have these comedic moments that are sort of very much tonally like our sense of humor, and some of them are a little dirty. And, you know, on the page, I think that was the most difficult thing when we were selling the movie, was kind of like trying to describe what the tone would be to people, because on the page it might move, they're like, the cat is shitting and puking on this plane. Is this like a broad comedic set piece, and then I'm spewing it all over people on the plane? And we'd be like, but understated, grounded, from an emotional place. It was like, so it was really fun in terms of all the actors coming on board, like having those conversations with them. Like even Haley, who obviously, yes, is such an intelligent actor, and being like, but don't worry, it's gonna be, actually, we do want you to fill out. And in that way, I realize I'm not finishing a lot of my sentences, but I'm getting somewhere. You know, with all of the actors, we did have these deep backstory conversations, because it was really important to us that every character had a rich backstory, even if it's one line of dialogue, you know, Danny referencing his recent breakup with Talia, or, you know, Jay's adoption story, or things like that.
Or
like,
even with Haley, who, you know, he's kind of a clown for most of the movie, but when he's making his speech at the wedding, you kind of realize, like, oh, this guy is a great family man.